Hello, this is Gary Marr of Arizona State University. This screen capture is for my IFT101 students. And what I wanted to show in this screen capture is more or less a summary of what we'll be learning over the next 8 weeks. And what we'll be learning is a programming development process so we can create our first programs in Python. Now we'll be using 2 textbooks to do this. One is the Sprinkle-Hubbard textbook, which will primarily focus on logic models. And then we'll also be doing some labs which will focus on programming, or specifically Python programming. Now the way this process will break down is we'll always have a problem or opportunity to work with. We'll have to define the requirements to solve that problem. We'll have to analyze the problem so we can then come up with a logic model, which for us is one of 3 flavors: an algorithm, flowchart, or pseudocode. The preference is pseudocode because pseudocodes and algorithms are very much the same. They're both text step-by-step, like a recipe you would make, or like driving directions that would show you the steps necessary to use logic to come up with a solution. A flowchart's a graphical model. We'll do a little bit with flowcharts, but typically what happens with flowcharts, as soon as the problem gets complicated, the flowcharts could be a little unwieldy, especially for an 8-week class. The next step is the programming piece. We will be using Python for that. Your labs will not really have you design a logic model and convert it into Python until later in the class. Initially, for the assignments, you'll be working just with pseudocode and algorithms. And in Python, you'll be pretty much just using the IDE idle or Thony, learning how to put the statements into a programming format. And the last step of the process is implementation. And that's where the program is done. We need to implement it, create some training materials, some documentation, and do a lot of testing. So what this would look like is if I was going to take a pseudocode problem. What I've done here is I put a bunch of statements with a hash symbol in the first position, and that would indicate a program comment. Even though pseudocode cannot be executed, I like to put program comments so that people understand that this part of what I'm putting in there, or you're going to do this too, is a simple English explanation or an explanation of what that logic needs to do. So what this has is some business rules. There's 3 of them. And what this is going to do is calculate the cost of installing some carpet, if I remember correctly. So I've got some variables: area, length, width. I don't have any constants as identifiers. And variables and constants is something you'll learn in the Sprinkle book in, I believe, chapters 1 and 2 or 2 and 3. We do some assignments where we say this is the variable, and take this variable, multiply it times another variable, the answer going into the area variable. Okay, and this all will become very clear as we get into the textbook. This is a little early in the process, so don't let this confuse you. This is just to kind of give you some of the landscape what we're going to be doing here. I'm then going to indicate the start of my logic in pseudocode with the start keyword. And then I'm going to use English-like phrases, statements, expressions to show what I want this program to do. So I want it to first store a value of 10 in length, 10 in width, and a rate of 0.4. Integer, floating point number. The next step of this program is the processing section. This is more or less the input section. This is the processing section. And here's where I'm going to do my calculations, or some of these business rules that I have above. And the business rules are going to calculate error. It's going to give me the labor rate. Notice how this statement has a multiplication symbol, and this statement has it spelled out, sorry. In pseudocode, anything goes. As long as you are just expressing what's going to happen, the programmer should be able to read this and convert it to whatever programming language they need to convert it to: Python, C, Java, JavaScript, etc. The last section of this particular logic model is going to display the output. And that's simply a string literal, which is going to print to the screen the text cost to customer. And then next to that, or below it I should say, it actually prints the cost value, which we've calculated up here. And then finally, pseudocode ends with the end statement. This is just an example. All of this material is covered as part of the class. Now, moving on to Python, this is what it would look like with Python code. Now, Python happens to use the hash symbol as the comment. That's the reason I used it in my pseudocode. Notice here the start command has been commented out because Python doesn't know anything about pseudocode. Pseudocode is just the directions that it's going to follow, or the blueprint it's going to use to build its logic. Python is case or position sensitive, so the statements have to start in the first position. So here is all of my variable definitions. Here are my calculations. And then in Python, there's a print function built into Python that displays information to the terminal. So what this is going to do is print cost to customer, again, just text, then a $sign, next to the $sign, the actual calculated value. So what we're doing here is we're starting off with a business problem, okay, an opportunity to create a new program to calculate the cost of carpet installation. We're going to identify all the inputs, processing that needs to be done, and the outputs. Sometimes during the requirements phase, we're going to think about the outputs first because that's what we want to get to. And what we want to get to is going to determine what inputs we need and what processing is done. But when it actually comes to writing the logic, you're going to start with inputs, then you're going to do the processing, and that's going to give you the final output. Okay? I hope this helps. Again, I'm almost hesitant to show you this too early because this early in the game, we're going to cover all of this stuff over the next 8 weeks and over the next 7 modules. I hope that helps. And again, I don't want you to get confused with it. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.